Hello. So today we're going to talk about what happened in South Florida where the building collapsed. The Champlain building collapsed in 2021 and killed almost 100 people. So since then, the South Florida building code has been not only enforced, but then reinforced and then updated. So here we can see the amount of buildings that are over 30 years old. So to start, we can think of a 30-year-old building, a building that needs to be inspected for safety, structural, and electrical concerns. Why? Because the structural concerns are what is what's causing them to collapse. So when we talk about structural concerns, we talk about the columns of the building, we talk about the metal reinforcement or the all the structure that is inside the building, as well as the concrete. We know because these buildings are close to the ocean, then salt gets into the concrete and then it also can damage the structural integrity of these buildings. In addition to that, there's many areas of the building that have to be accessed in order to upgrade electrical panels, sprinkler systems, and other stuff. So why is this relevant to an asbestos abatement contractor and to the residents of these buildings? Many of these buildings, the ones that are 40, 50, 60 years old, they have to be inspected every 10 years. And every 10 years, new regulations show up and they have to be upgraded to these, to comply with these new regulations. In some cases, they have to replace the sprinkler system or even better, install a new sprinkler system because it's non-existent. In this case, we have to remove popcorn. And in many of these buildings, we see the popcorn is asbestos containing material and it needs to be removed by an asbestos contractor. The permitting for this is very complex, as well as the logistics to remove all the residents in order to be able to get the popcorn out of the hallways or the common areas. Okay, so we need to make sure that when we're doing a 40, 50, 60-year inspection, we consider whether or not the walls are skim coated or are coated with some sort of asbestos containing material. The foundation could be coated, or some mastic could be in the foundation to glue down some decoration stones, some paneling. There could be asbestos containing insulation underneath the carports. There could be popcorn material. There could be drywall, as well as flooring materials that are in storage units or in common areas. All these materials have to be considered whenever you're doing a 40-year reinspection or safety inspection or any upgrades whatsoever. We are being called plenty of times to be able to help these buildings with the asbestos removal before we can do before they can do the repairs and upgrades necessary for these buildings. So believe it or not, these are some of the areas where we can find asbestos. Here you have a coating. This coating, as you can see, has some sort of pebbles, and these pebbles sometimes contain asbestos, so this is a suspicious material. The concrete underneath those is also suspicious material for asbestos. We can then see fire doors, and the fire doors could be asbestos containing material inside the door. So that's another place where we can find it. Then we can go, and in this case, we did remove some asbestos insulation out of this concrete slab. Then there's some asbestos that could be found in pipe covers or pipe insulation, as well as any of these other fireproofing, plumbing penetration seal ups, and any of those areas could have asbestos. There's some of the insulation in the pipes, as you can see, could contain asbestos, and we will have to make sure that all this is considered whenever we're doing an inspection for the safety reinspection or upgrade. We're going to keep going up to other areas of the building to find what else is going to be upgraded, touch, remove, or um, conceal. Okay, we're going to see some of the challenges that we're going to encounter in this type of structures. These type of structures that have been um, updated little by little for the past 40, 50, 60 years are going to have some issues when it comes to removing the popcorn or removing any asbestos containing material. In this case, we can see popcorn is very present in all the hallways of the building. So what we're going to have to do is cover all these walls. And the idea in this situation is only to remove the popcorn. We are not going to touch the walls because they are covered. And the idea is for us to remove the popcorn so they can do electrical and sprinklers upgrades in these hallways or the community areas or the common areas of the building. So here we will be covering all the walls and floors in order to be able to remove the popcorn that contains asbestos, and then they can work on this building. We can see the challenge is that all this debris, as well as all the protection and all the people, have to even be going down through an elevator or through the steps. But we can see the size of this building and then understanding what the challenge will be if we have to walk. So this is the size of the building. So walking down the debris over 20 floors is not an easy task. We can see the partner building that is being upgraded in the outside because of structural concerns. We can see that some of the workers are removing the top coating that it has been already studied for asbestos containing materials has been clear for that, and then removing that in order to re-secure the structural integrity of the building and avoid collapsing. Most of the buildings that you can see are past their 30, 40, 50-year inspection. So any upgrades that require, they need to be inspected for asbestos. Different type of challenges is that sometimes we find asbestos containing materials in some of these rooms. So electrical rooms also contain electrical pipes. In this case, we don't have any floor tiles, but we do have this type of insulation. In this case, insulation was replaced from asbestos to fiberglass. So this is fiberglass, but we can also see there's some red fire caulk, and the red fire caulk sometimes does contain asbestos, as you can see in the other corner too. Okay. Just to make sure that we're clear in all the areas that could contain asbestos when you're doing this type of renovation. So to summarize in here, you could have asbestos underneath the carpet, underneath the tile, underneath the wallpaper, in the joint compound, in the drywall, in the mastic that is touching the drywall, in the popcorn, in any of the plumbing penetrations or HVAC penetrations that go into the into the units. So there's plenty of locations where you can find that. And then even in here, sometimes around the chute, you can find a caulk that contains asbestos. This is a prime example of where you can find some plumbing penetrations and some stuff. So here we can see that these are plumbing penetrations. They look pretty new. So in this case, we don't see any sort of fire retardant or fire block. And here we're going to show another concern or another problem. This is another issue. Sometimes pipes can be hidden behind walls. So if you can see this pipe, this could be an asbestos containing pipe that is inside a void all the way in the penthouse floor, which is over 20 stories high. This pipe will be a very challenging pipe to remove. Now, where else can I find asbestos in this opening? So in this opening, you have the grout from the blocks, which is the material that goes in between the two blocks. Then you have the skim coat or the top coat that is on top of that block. As you can see, is on top of the block that could also contain asbestos. And all these materials that look like leftover joint compound can also contain asbestos. Now let's talk about the cost on time and money when we are doing structural repairs, upgrades. In this case, we didn't find any asbestos in the buildings, but you still have to see that these buildings require a lot of jacks, a lot of temporary posts, and a lot of work at really high altitudes. So that is really, really not only time consuming, but budget consuming. Um, when we move into concrete structures, they are sometimes needing reinforcement, sometimes they needing repairs, and that can also be really costly for the exterior of the building, the community areas of the buildings. That being said, you can also focus on your unit. So if you are wanting your unit to be abated, you can also do that, and then that way you and your family are not exposed to contaminants. And then if you have to do any electrical repair, any plumbing repair, any floor repairs, you know that you're not dealing with a problem with asbestos or lead. So make sure that you inspect the unit before you acquire it and you know what you're dealing with. Even though um, it could be no disturb. If you know what's in the unit, you know for a fact what you have to do if an emergency occur. I also recommend that before an emergency occur, you remove contaminants from the units so you don't have to do it in an emergency mode. You can plan it and do it in a process of moving or in a process of a planned renovation.